Yashodanandana Vrajadana Ranjana Jamunatira Vanatari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Hare Krishna, 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. John Vishnupad Paramhansa Parivajigacharya Ashtotara Shatta Sri Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. John Vishnupad Paramahansa Parivrajikacharya Ashtotara Shatta Sri Srimad Bhakti Siddhanta Sarasvati Thakur Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Nantakoti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai Karantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai Jani Tagore Premanandi Hari Hari Bol Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Good morning, everyone. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam today, 5th canto, chapter 18, text number 33. Yasmin asankyeya visheshanama rupakrito kavibi kalpiteyam Sankyaya tattva drishapiniyate tasmai nama sankhya nirdarshanayate iti yasminna sankhya visheshanama rupakrito kavibi kalpiteyam Sankyaya tattva drishapiniyate tasmai nama sankhya nidarshanayate iti Yasmin asankyeya visheshanama rupakrito kavibi kalpiteyam Sankyaya tattva drishapaniyate tasmai nama sankhya nidarshanayate iti. Word for word, Yasmin, in you, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, asankyeya, innumerable, vishesha, particular, nama, names, rupa, forms, akrito, possessing bodily features, kavibi, by great learned persons, kalpita, imagined, yam, this, sankhya, number, yaya, by whom, tattva, of the truth, drisha, by knowledge, apaniyate, is extracted. Tasmai, unto him, nama, respectful obeisances. Sankhya nirdarshanaya, who is the revealer of this numerical knowledge. Te, unto you, iti, thus. Translation. O my Lord, your name, form, and bodily features are expanded in countless forms. No one can determine exactly how many forms exist, yet you yourself, in your incarnation as the learned scholar Kapila Dev, have analyzed the cosmic manifestation as containing 24 elements. Therefore, if one is interested in Sankhya philosophy, by which one can enumerate the different truths, he must hear it from you. Unfortunately, non-devotees simply count the different elements and remain ignorant of your actual form. I offer my respectful obeisances unto you. Purport. Philosophers and scientists have been trying to study the entire cosmic situation and have been theorizing and calculating in different ways for millions and millions of years. However, the speculative research work of a so-called scientist or philosopher is always interrupted when he dies, and the laws of nature go on without regard for his work. For billions of years, changes take place in the material creation, until at last the whole universe is dissolved and remains in an unmanifested state. Constant change and destruction, bhutva praliyate, is perpetually going on in nature, yet the material scientists want to study natural laws without knowing the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the background of nature. As Krishna states in Bhagavad Gita 9:10, Maya yakshena prakriti suyate sacharacharam hitunanena kaunteya jagadviparivartate. This material nature is working under my direction, O son of Kunti, and it is producing all moving and unmoving beings. By its rule, this manifestation is created and annihilated again and again. Now the material creation is manifest. Eventually it will be annihilated and remain for many millions of years in a dormant state. And finally it will again be created. This is the law of nature. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Om Jnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Translation again. O my Lord, your name, form, and bodily features are expanded in countless forms. No one can determine exactly how many forms exist, yet you yourself, in your incarnation as the learned scholar Kapila Dev, have analyzed the cosmic manifestation as containing 24 elements. Therefore, if one is interested in Sankhya philosophy, by which one can enumerate the different truths, he must hear it from you. Unfortunately, non-devotees simply count the different elements and remain ignorant of your actual form. I offer my respectful obeisances unto you. So I just realized I forgot to read Srila Prabhupada Leelamrita, so I'll just do that now. It's sitting right here, ready to go. So I'll just read this first. So this is in Jaipur, January 12th, 1972. Jaipur is an ancient city in the state of Rajasthan. Occasionally, some of Prabhupada's disciples would go there to purchase marble Radha Krishna deities for ISKCON temples in India and around the world. The devotees in ISKCON centers in Detroit, Toronto, Dallas, as well as throughout Europe, wanted to install Radha Krishna deities and, with Srila Prabhupada's permission, were ordering murtis from Jaipur. On such an errand, two women, Kaushalya and Srimati, had gone to Jaipur in January of 1972 on behalf of the New York City Temple. When a government official had discovered Srimati wasn't carrying her passport, the officials, suspicious of spies due to the war with Pakistan, had insisted the woman stay in town until Srimati's passport arrived in the mail. Meanwhile, the girls had daily visited the Govindaji temple and had sometimes held kirtan in the streets in front of the temple. They had had daily talks with P.K. Goswami, who was in charge of the temple, as well as Jaipur businessmen and other respectable citizens. Almost everyone in Jaipur regularly visits the beloved deities of Radha Govinda. The citizens of Jaipur had been moved by the devotion of Prabhupada's two disciples, and when one of the men had asked, quote, "What can we do to help your movement?" end quote, the girls had replied, "Bring Srila Prabhupada here." Some of Jaipur's prominent citizens had devised a plan to share expenses and responsibilities in arranging a Pandal program, and the two women had sent a letter to Prabhupada in Bombay, inviting him to come and preach. He had agreed. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So back to the Bhagavatam. First of all, I guess just context is always good. I might start making a habit of doing that before I even speak on what I'm speaking. Bhagavatam is a very expansive book for a start. It's not just like you're reading one simple story. It's probably the most diverse, complicated story book ever, if you can call it that. It's a Purana, so I guess you can call it a storybook, a history. But usually a storybook, you've got one main character and you follow that person through, and it's pretty easy to get the storyline. So in one sense, the Bhagavatam does have that. You do have a main character, Parikshit Maharaj, and Shukadeva Goswami speaking to him. But then what they talk about makes it very diverse and multifaceted. So we're up to the fifth canto at the moment, discussing the shape and form of the universe. And so currently we're hearing prayers from the residents of Jambudweep in chapter 18. And in all the different lokas, the different varshas, the different islands, the dweepas, the different residents in these different locations, they have different leaders, and they themselves are of different natures, and they have different worshipful deities. So right now, we're in the Hiranmaya Varsha, where the Lord is in the form of Kurma. That's his incarnation there. And Aryama, along with the other residents there, they worship him. And they chant a prayer. And this particular verse is the final part of 4 verses of the prayer. So in the purport, Prabhupada's not so much focusing on that, from what I can gather. He's focusing more on this point of the Sankhya philosophy and counting the different truths. So that's part of the prayer, and that's the particular point that Prabhupada seems to be focusing on here, that how do we actually know the truth? And so he gets onto the point of the philosophers and the scientists, because in the modern world, we accept the scientists as authorities. I mean, that's a general statement. Of course, many people don't, and individuals may think that they're totally bogus. But I'll get into that more later. But the point is that we need some authority, and Prabhupada's pointing them out as the authority that's generally accepted and was going to start to pick them apart. So one thing that I recently heard, I can't remember the exact statistic, maybe someone here knows it, but when I heard it, I was actually a little surprised, but I shouldn't have been. But because I'm here in New Zealand, I was. In this small, tiny little country that's ignorant of what's happening in the rest of the world. Um, I heard this statement, and I'll get the number a little bit wrong, but it's something like 60% of the world's population believes in God. Something like that. In other words, the majority believes in God. It was over 50%. I remember that much. It was either like 55% or 60, something like that. But the point was, oh, that's right. Now I remember. It was a quote from Urmila Mataji. She was pointing this out. So yeah, basically the point is that most of the world actually believes in God. So in that sense, actually the scientists aren't the major authority for most of the world. They're actually the second authority. But the way the modern world's going, they're becoming more and more prominent as time goes by, as people become more and more irreligious. It's Kali Yuga. But as I said, that quote, that statistic actually says that over 50% are actually faithful and believe in God. So that's interesting. But here, the main point that's often stressed is that it's not that scientists are totally bogus. Prabhupada will call them bogus and nonsense and things like that, and that's true. At the same time, they do have some abilities and some talents. I mean, I wouldn't be able to speak to you right now on this particular Apple MacBook Air using microchips and Wi-Fi and all sorts of stuff if the scientists were totally bogus. So they do have some ability. We'll give them that. Um, but the main point is that they are not authorities in all departments. And the main department that is a big question in the world is where do we come from? Why am I here? What's the purpose of life, etc., etc. And that the scientists have no real proper authority in that area. They say all sorts of crazy things, all sorts of theories. And there's so many different angles I could take on that. I was having more thoughts about it this morning, but the bottom line is that they don't really know. And I'll get into that more as we progress, but basically scientists can say whatever the hell they want. But the facts are the facts. So a little kid can come in the room and say, you know, the sky is pink. And that may be true when it's at day when it's at dawn or dusk and there's some clouds and the sun's on a particular angle. At that point in time, the sky might be pink, but the rest of the time it's not, it's blue. So if in the middle of the day, the sun's shining, it's a clear sky, the sky's blue, and a kid says the sky's pink, then no one takes them seriously. So similarly, the scientists are like that in their theories of how the universe came about. They say so many things, but that's not a fact. It's just a theory. And that's exactly why they use that very nice word theory, because it means it's not true. It's just a speculation. So Prabhupada is drilling this point quite often throughout his books. There's even a whole book dedicated to this point. Life comes from life. That's where life really comes from. It doesn't come from matter. So Srila Prabhupada ends the purport by saying, this is the law of nature. In other words, the facts are the facts. You can say whatever you want, but things are what they are. So we have to ask ourselves as always, you know, who's your authority? Whose knowledge do you accept? Because practically speaking, we're all pretty tiny and we don't really know so much. And what we do know, we got from someone else. So we're pretty much dependent. We have to basically choose where we accept knowledge from. So science is good for certain things, electronics, construction, transport, many things. But when it comes to the question of how the universe came about, and who's in control and what's the purpose of the universe, that's where modern so-called science may not be the best methodology. And on the flip side, Krishna consciousness is actually not a religious belief. It's actually a science. Prabhupada would always propose that. Because what is a science? A science means you've got a hypothesis, you test that hypothesis with your experiment, and then you get a result. So in that sense, Krishna consciousness is actually a science. We have a hypothesis that we are a spirit, part and parcel of Krishna. We're here in this material world. There's a process, Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti, hearing and chanting about Krishna, worshipping the deity, making prayers, so many different things to reestablish our relationship with Krishna and go back home, back to Godhead. So it is a science, and we can get results on different degrees. We can get immediate results. Just someone, brand new person, can get results from chanting Hare Krishna and realize there's something special here just by tasting prasadam like that. One can experience immediate results. But on the flip side, science is often, so-called science, as it's called today, is often not scientific because the same thing applies. Hypothesis, and then an experiment, and then a result. So the often given challenge is, okay, if you say that life comes from matter, then here's your matter, please produce me some life. And they can't do it. They do different things, they juggle, and they produce life basically from another life, but say it came from matter by doing things like cloning and stuff like that. But anyway. And the other thing is, okay, if the universe came from a Big Bang, or there's so many other theories out there, but that's obviously one of the most commonly known ones. If the universe came from a Big Bang, can you please reproduce that in your laboratory? No. If evolution is true, can you please reproduce that? Show me that. No. So many different things. So science originally came from religion, and that's an often forgotten fact as well. Science was actually a way of proving what's in religious texts. So there's so many things today that are accepted, but basically 99.9% of the population is in ignorance. We don't know the history of science. We don't know how it came about. We don't know the proper methodology. We don't know all the cheating and lying that's going on behind the scenes, all the cover-ups. So welcome to the material world. So in other words, if you want to enjoy and pretend that you're God, you can say anything, do anything you want, and make any bogus philosophy to justify basically doing whatever the hell you like. And that's Kali Yuga. So getting onto the more nitty-gritty, if one wants some more facts and some more hard evidence, there's so many books that have been produced, not just by devotees, of course, although those are ones that I know of. Like one probably the most famous one in terms of the outside world, that the non-devotional world, the non-Hare Krishna world that know about, is Michael Cremo's book, Forbidden Archaeology, basically exposing all the bogus cover-ups about so many different findings, just stacks and stacks and stacks and pages and pages and pages and cases and cases and cases of evidence that show that the theory of evolution is wrong and how it's all been covered up. That's one book. There's also Rethinking Darwin, a more modern one by Lalita Prabhu, and he collaborates with various other scientists who aren't devotees, and they again show how the theory of evolution is completely bogus. Then there's also Searching for Vedic India by my own spiritual master, Devanamrita Maharaj, and that doesn't specifically target the theory of evolution, but indirectly it does, where he points out that in science, what often happens is they have a theory which is never proven, and then they build on that theory, and then what's built on that theory, you have the second layer, then someone else comes along later and builds on that, and then they build on that. And you have all these things that are built on an original theory that was never actually proven. And that's basically the theory of evolution. It was never actually proven. And then people just built on it and added different branches to it and expanded upon it when the actual foundation of the whole thing was never actually proven. So this is what often happens in science. There's often a theory and people think it sounds good and they never actually prove it, and then they build on it and then it just becomes accepted because, it happened 100 years ago. People forgot about the fact that it was never actually proven because it was so long ago, and then it just somehow or other becomes accepted. So this is the crazy world we live in. So, and also science is always revising and recalculating everything. Uh, so how can you ever accept anything they say if they know that they're always going to have to revise and recalculate it? That basically means it's never true. So how can you ever accept it? So a lot of these things make us think. Um, Prabhupada uses very generous terms in his purport. The speculative research work of a so-called scientist. So yeah, word jugglery is mentioned in the 12th canto. Someone will be considered learned if he can just juggle some words. Now, we can be very negative. We can be very critical of the scientists. And yes, we will do that in many places. And we're following in the footsteps of Srila Prabhupada in doing that. At the same time, there is a reason why people have so much faith in the scientists of the modern world, and that's because they give us technology. They've given us something. They've actually given us something that we find valuable, useful, or a better way of putting it, gives us sense gratification. Gives us because actually, if we dig down deep, it actually isn't helping us. We don't need much in this world. We need actually a very simple life, but because we've become addicted to all these different things, we feel like we need them now, and if we don't have them, then we can't function. Our mind short circuits. As Tamal Krishna Maharaj says to Srila Prabhupada, I just read it briefly in the Leelamrita somewhere. Maybe you already read it, or maybe it's coming up. That Prabhupada, we're Westerners, we need doorknobs and running water. This is when they're in Bombay. And yeah, it's very austere for all the devotees there. So for someone from a more agrarian or rural background, they can handle that kind of thing. But from a Westerner who grew up in the big city, it's very austere. So similarly, all this technology that we've been given by the scientists, if we had to do without it, at first it would be very difficult. Of course, we could survive. We don't actually need it, but our mind's so attached to it that we think we need it. Just like when you misplace your smartphone, it's just like you've lost your whole brain or something. You've lost your whole life. It's like, woe is me. If only I was as attached to Krishna as I was attached to my smartphone. It's like every minute, it's like someone messaging me. What's the time? What's on my to-do list? What does this word mean? What's the news saying? It's like everything's there. So we become very attached to this thing. But we don't actually need it. There was a time, maybe just 5 or 10 years ago, where we didn't have them and we were fine. So the mind just gets very attached to all these different things. So similarly, it gets attached to technology, which we don't really need, all this crazy stuff. Simple living, high thinking was Prabhupada's motto. And people got by in previous times. If they didn't, then why are we here today? So they survived. But Prabhupada makes the point that whatever speculation a so-called scientist does, however meritorious it may be, it's always interrupted when he dies. You're either forgotten, like no one remembers you, you don't finish the work, or even if you are accepted and you did do something substantial in the research world of science, then in 100 or so years, generally you're forgotten. And ultimately, as Daksha says to the Lord in the sixth canto, he says, "Let me offer my respectful obeisances unto the all-pervading Supreme Lord. Acting from within the cause of the hearts of all philosophers who propagate various views, the Lord causes them to forget their own souls, while sometimes agreeing and sometimes disagreeing among themselves. Thus, the Lord creates a situation in this material world in which they are unable to come to a conclusion." So, in other words, the scientists and all their knowledge, actually, Krishna's just giving it to them. Whatever theory they come up with, Krishna's actually just supplying it to them to help them forget him because they want to. So Krishna's going, okay, you want to forget me? Here's a theory that you can propagate to help convince yourself and others that I don't exist and that you should just enjoy your senses, and that's it. So Krishna's very kind in that way. He's giving us what we want. But even though there is all this technological advancement, factually, as Prabhupada would point out so many times, people are still getting old, people are still getting diseased, birth is still going on, and people are still dying. So what have you really done? And the scientists themselves, they die. So it's not that they just can't help others from these things, but they can't even help themselves. And I was just reflecting on two of the most prominent scientists in recent times. One of them is Albert Einstein, and another one is Stephen Hawking. If you don't know who they are, I worship your lotus feet. Fortunately, I know who both of them are. Um, but to be fair, Albert Einstein, I was just thinking about this. He's one of the most brilliant scientists in recent times, Albert Einstein. But he believed in God. So there you go. If you take your scientist as your authority, then Albert Einstein said, hey, he's there. But the other one, Stephen Hawking, he didn't. But if you look at what he had to say on that topic, the origin of the universe and God and like that, he was speculating his pants off. I don't know I haven't read too much of this, but I just remember my spiritual master reading from one of his books recently, maybe a couple of years ago, and just like reading some of the stuff he said, just the massive speculations that he put in one of his books, and just showing how there's absolutely no substance to it. So these are the two most brilliant scientists of recent times. So one of them was just speculating his pants off, and the other one actually believed in God. So again, if anyone takes like a few moments to think about these things, then you can't really take the scientists and their ideas of the origin of the universe and the Big Bang and matter being the cause of life and like that seriously. But we accept these things because we want to be an illusion and we want to enjoy and not think about a God that we have to answer to after we die for all our sinful activities. We don't want to think of that. And I was also thinking that these two scientists, Albert Einstein and Stephen Hawking, as brilliant as they both were, they both, ironically, they both died at exactly the same age, which was an interesting fact. I didn't expect to find that. They both died at 76. And I was just thinking that I heard my spiritual master say recently that his mother's made it to 97 or so. She's pretty old. I mean, he's 75. So she's at least 20 years older than him. So yeah, she's either 95, 96, 97, something like that. So from one angle, you could say that she's smarter than Albert Einstein and Stephen Hawking because she managed to figure out how to live 20 years longer than they did. So what's your measure of success? That's the question. What do we really want? So if we want to take knowledge from an authorized source, then we get proper knowledge. So Prabhupada's mentioning this in the second paragraph of the purport, that if we listen to Krishna, then we get the real Siddhanta of what's really happening. So that's always the main question. Who do we accept as our authority? Why do you accept them as your authority? That's the other question. Another point to bring up is the character of the people that you're accepting as your authority. So many of the modern scientists, they're basically just cheaters. They say so many things to get money, basically, and that's what practically most people in this world are doing, lying and cheating to get money, and the scientists are no different. They want their grants, and they'll forge results, so big companies will give them more and more money, things like that. As Druta Prabhu, he mentions that World War II was a turning point in history for science. There were many turning points, of course, but this one was quite a major one. From World War II onwards, that point on, science became even more focused on gross technology and weaponry and never looked back. Of course, we know about the nuclear weaponry. But the point was is that people wanted to win a war, and we need to use everything at our disposal to do that. And science means technology, and technology means that we may be able to beat the other team with our superior technology. So any other research into the paranormal, subtle things, that all got slashed, all the funding for that got cut, and it never really got restored ever again. I mean, people are doing more alternative research again today. It started resurfacing, but for quite a long time, it was basically no funding was given towards it. It was all money was channeled towards gross technology, and specifically weaponry, things like that. So I've mentioned pretty much everything that I wanted to speak on. I'm just checking my last point here. Yeah, so basically the question is, what do you want? If you want a technologically advanced society of demons, then yeah, take the scientists as your authority. But if you want a moderate, modestly, a modestly advanced civilization in terms of technology, but full of people of good character, devotees, then you'd obviously take the Parampara as your authority. So we only have so much time in this world. We can see that. We see everyone dying around us. Even the most intelligent people, as I already pointed out, at 76, these two people, Albert Einstein and Stephen Hawking, died. So we only have so much time. How do you want to spend it? Do you want to spend it improving matter, improving technology, or do you want to spend it improving your character and becoming more spiritually self-realized? So Prabhupada's words famously said so many times is simple living, high thinking. That's the devotee's motto. So in conclusion, we can ask ourselves, what do we want? Where do we want to go? What's the goal of our life? So by all means, the scientists are an authority, but they are an authority in a different domain. So if the goal is technological advancement, then sure. But if the goal is pure love for God, pure love for Krishna and all other living beings, then follow the devotees. And ultimately, actually, if proper Vedic culture is established and things are properly set up, then actually we get the best technology. As we can see from the history of the Vedas, actually they have far superior technology. So the technology today is quite gross, quite low class, but because in Kali Yuga we are ourselves low class, we think it's amazing. As Sanjay was showing, you know, he could see what was happening on a battlefield thousands of miles away, or however far away it was. Whereas today we need all these gadgets, and we have to spend thousands and thousands of dollars so we can watch some TV. And then what's being put on TV is bogus propaganda as well. We're getting our brains washed, whereas Sanjay was seeing the real thing. So ancient Vedic technology is superior in all respects as well. So from that angle, you shouldn't take the scientists as your authority, even from that point of view. But at the moment, they are holding forth. No one's really able to compete with them in that department. So they they hold the keys, so to speak. They have given nuclear weapons the big thumbs up. They've made them more and more powerful, and that's what's controlling the world at the moment, basically. Fear of other nations and their weaponry, especially nuclear weapons. So everyone's just, you have America who says they believe in God, but whether or not that's true, it doesn't matter. They've got the most nuclear weapons, so therefore we better just not fight with them. And then you have other countries who are completely atheistic or communistic or whatever, but they've also got nuclear weapons, so we better not mess with them either. So it's just all about weaponry, and so therefore scientists are very valuable people in modern society from that point of view. So these are just some thoughts. I've rambled a little bit, but the main point is that what do you want from life, and where do you want to go? And therefore, that's who you accept as your ultimate authority, especially on the major questions in life. So thank you for listening. I don't know if we have much time left for questions, but should we end it there, or is there time for questions?
Hare Krishna Prabhu, Dandavad Pranam. Thank you very much for explaining the verse so nicely, and particularly the importance of sciences as well as the spiritual knowledge vis-a-vis, and what one should accept ultimately depends on him. Because if you are allured by the glitterings of the material world, yes, scientists has got very important place in the society because they are creating a new and newer things, powerful things. But one has to understand, as you have told also very nicely, that the lifespan is limited for any human being, and he has to decide what he will do. Because if he doesn't use this life for introspection of the real problems of life, as Prabhupada has put in, then in one way his life is wasted. Because he just like going for glittering things and try to know in this short span of human life, he will not be able to do anything on that. And it is better, as Prabhupada is told, to use this life for inquiring about the higher truths and why we are born to this world and why we die and how we can get eternal life. So it is better as a devotee to hear from our spiritual authorities and pursue a life what they consider as the goal of life, and if we honestly pursue that, we can make our life success. And that is my takeaway. Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Thank you very much. Right, I hope you all have a wonderful day. Hare Krishna. Grantara Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Gadai Gauranga Prabhu ki
Jai.
Gaur Premanande. All glories to assembled devotees.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Thank you.